Welcome to the Content Amplified podcast, brought to you by Masset. Our goal is to help you get more from your marketing content. Each episode is a 10 to 15 minute interview with industry experts that share amazing insights to help you squeeze as much juice from your content as you possibly can. Here's today's interview.
Welcome back to another episode of Content Amplified. Today I'm joined by Shannon. Shannon, welcome to the show.
Hey, Benjamin. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
I love it. I'm excited for the topic today. It's something that we're both very passionate about. But Shannon, before we dive into the subject, maybe just a quick introduction. Who you are, what you love about content, how you got into the game and all that kind of stuff. Would love to hear that and hear your experience.
Sure. So hi, Shannon Howard, Director of Customer and Content Marketing at Intellum. I think I've had just kind of a long and winding journey in content of all different varieties. So we're talking a little bit earlier about just the different types of content, not just blog content or social content, but webinar content, educational content, email content, campaign content, research reports even. And so just kind of getting the opportunity to dig into each of those. And I have always loved to write. I also weirdly love to answer questions. And I got the opportunity recently to volunteer for a conference at the front desk. And I was like, this is perfect for me because I just get to answer questions all morning, which I love to do. And so that's what I love about content is being able to answer questions and help people take their next step and get to do that through writing. So it's like combines all the things that I love and am passionate about.
I love that. I love that. And clearly it's so nice when you can find your passions and combine it with work and everything you're doing to provide value. It's one of those sweet spots. And I think that's something that people in marketing really love and appreciate is they can often translate some of those skills into really just helping and benefiting people and doing things the right way. So along those lines, today we're going to talk about creating educational content. I think a lot of the times though, there is this misnomer. Is it promotional? Is it educational? When, where, how, if, all of that kind of stuff. So Shannon, when it comes to educational content, what is a good place to start? I guess my number one concern is how do you not regurgitate material that's already out there, but actually provide valuable educational content? How do you get started? What's your thought process? How do you actually differentiate when it comes to this content?
Maybe important to think when we talk about educational content, there's like marketing content that's educational in nature, right? So 5 steps to how to blah, blah, blah versus customer education content, which is really about driving behavior change, usually with your product to help your customers to be successful. And I think those are 2 different types of content and skill sets, right? So you have more of an instructional design, learning experience design on the education side, and then you have more of that content marketing on the marketing side. When I think about this, I think, what are those questions that people are asking and what problems are they trying to solve and start there? So when they're finding this piece of content, it's usually not random, right? They found it through a Google search. They found it on social. What made them click through and what were they hoping to get by reading this piece of content? And usually we don't read content just for fun, at least in the B2B sense, right? I don't have time to read content just because it makes me feel good. I need to read to learn how to do my job, right? Our industry is changing. Our jobs are rapidly changing. We need to learn how to keep up. And so I'm thinking, well, what is it that this person needs to know when they come here? What question are they trying to answer? Problem are they trying to solve? And start there with kind of the intent before I start thinking about, well, what am I going to write and how am I going to write it?
I love that. I love that. So what are some ways where you've noticed, we were talking before we started recording, when you look at the search results, so let's go to the marketing content, educational content side. You look at search results and you've got the AI stuff that's real regurgitation. You've got the other stuff that's too high level. How does someone really stand out? Like, what are some tips and tricks to really make your content stand out and actually prove a little bit about what you're talking about instead of just reading articles and spitting them back out? Like, what have you seen and how can you make a difference?
So I think it is important to look at those top search results to see what do we like? What do we not like? Where are they hitting the mark? Where are they missing the mark? And then figure out how can we fill in the gap? And I also think having a writer with some degree of industry experience, if you're in content marketing and you have not immersed yourself in the industry you serve, I think you're doing a disservice to yourself and your readers, right? You need to kind of understand the lingo and you need to understand the problems and their pains and how they talk. And so whether that's listening to sales calls, listening to customer calls, getting in community and just hearing what people talk about, that's where I find a lot of content ideas. I never have a problem with not enough content ideas because every day 10 new things are being introduced to my potential content calendar, right? Because people are talking, are we listening? And then the other part is engaging with subject matter experts. So there are things that I know from my own experience that I can write about, but this world of customer education is huge and I don't know everything about it. And so that's where I'm looking to people in the industry and I'm looking to our customers to understand, well, how do you think about this? How do you approach this problem? And I'm asking them the questions that other people would be asking and using that to inform content. And so I think what you see with a lot of these AI content or just very obviously a freelancer wrote it, like based off the other top 5 search results, it does appear very high level or generic. But when you bring in that firsthand experience or the secondhand experience that you're translating into content, I think that's when it becomes very real, contextual, valuable, relevant. And search is moving in a direction where that matters, right? Like we're writing for search, certain parameters to rank, but part of that ranking is also, did we meet their query? Did we solve the problem they were searching for? And I think that's where we're going to start to see our own like valuable content rank higher because we invested that time.
I love that. I love that. I love that process. Like the idea of how you're listening and the content ideas just keep flowing because you're tapped into the place. You're looking at the forums, you're reading the material. What are the questions? What are people talking about? What do they care about? And then saying, okay, cool. There's a need here. Let's go create the article. And then I love that you tap into the subject matter experts because I do think that that's one of the biggest differentiators. It takes extra time. It takes extra effort. Sometimes it takes bribery or brownies or whatever it may take, flattery to get people to, talk to you. But it shines through from the very first word inside your articles and your content. If someone knows what they're talking about and can get through all the other stuff versus like clearly an intern just studied the subject on a few blog posts and then wrote about it. So I love that idea. So when you're looking at this process, it sounds like you're focusing on the need, writing the content, and then you're worried about the rankings. Is that true? And then how do you retrofit rankings into content that's solving a need versus writing for Google? Like, how do you kind of weigh and balance those?
Sure. So I'll give you an example. So last year, there was an SEO blog that I was going to assign to a freelancer who had a lot of industry experience. So that's where, I felt comfortable. Yeah. And she ended up not having the time with other things and other projects going on where it came back to me and I thought, dang it, I don't want to write for search. And then I thought, you know what? I'm not going to write for search. I'm going to write to solve the problem and answer the question. And then I'm going to go back and retrofit for search, right? And so I use the SEMrush has the SEO writing assistant, which is such a dream for me because it has a little like score, and I live for the score, for it to be in the green 9s out of 10. And so I wrote the blog and just said, what's a question that people are answering? What is it that they need to know? And so this was around the ROI of customer training. And I was looking at other blogs and they were very high level. It was just very much, here are the metrics you should measure. Well, that's not what I Googled. I didn't Google what metrics should I measure. I Googled how do I prove the value of customer training? That requires math, right? Which is not really my forte, but I can, help you figure out. And then the other part that I thought about was, it's not just the formula, it's where do you get that data from? Because most people don't have access to all this data around the company. So who is it that they need to talk to that has that data? And that's what I included there. So I just wrote the way, if I was explaining it to someone else, hey, here's some different metrics you could measure. And then here's the formula for that. Here's where you can find those data points. Here's some tips I've learned from my own experience trying to do this. And then I just layered in the SEO writing assistant and it was already like 8 point something, right? It already was original. The tone of voice was there. And most of the keywords were there because I was answering the question. And then it was just kind of going back in and making some small tweaks where maybe I was saying customer support instead of customer service or product training instead of just training. I don't know. And so I was kind of going back in and then layering it in. And that article like very quickly moved to the top 5 search results. So that's where I do think if you're kind of solving the problem, just naturally a lot of that will be in there. And then I would go in and kind of layer in the keywords, not changing the meaning of anything, but just trying to hack really the system.
I love that. I think that's so cool. Because really, I think something we forget sometimes, which is shocking, because like it really shouldn't be something we forget, is great. We rank on Google, but if someone gets there and they actually read the content, are like, does it do any good? You know, obviously they are going to have, this is potentially their first impression or only impression about your brand. And if it's surface level content, what does that say about your product?
Mm-hmm.
What does it say about your services? What does it say about your expertise in the field? Versus, hey, great, we ranked and they saw the content and they just understood, they felt heard, they got answers, and they're like, okay, cool. Now when I need this product and or service, I know who I'm going to. It's like that trust and brand authority. I think that's the right process for doing that. I love that. So when you're writing content, and I think sometimes there might be this like thin line of saying, okay, should I write this? How should I write this? How this? What are some internal questions you ask yourself before you ever say, should we write this content? Is there like a litmus test that you ask you and your team to say, is this going to provide value? Is it not? Also, do you have like certain like standards of quality that you put it through before it goes live? How do you really fully adopt this before you even write any content?
So questions I ask myself, and this is the interesting part too, right? Because we have to balance what provides value for the business as well as what provides value for the reader. So I'm thinking always, does this tie to our product, right? Because there are plenty of listicle SEO articles that I can develop that have nothing to do with our product. I don't want that traffic. You know, I don't want to rank for something that doesn't matter. The second thing is this actually something people are struggling with or have a question about, or am I just writing for the sake of writing? Because if it's not top of mind, then it's not being read and it's not being shared. And it doesn't mean that's not a good idea, but maybe it's an idea for later, you know, because there's also seasons that people go through in terms of when they're looking for this content versus this content. And again, like just being active in community forums, I can see the trends of, oh, everybody's asking about that right now. Everybody has questions about that. It seems like we're in this type of season. And so I can be a little flexible in my content schedule to look at what are those questions that people are asking. And then in terms of quality, it really is, can someone read this and walk away with something actionable? I don't want people to read and be like, oh, that's cool. That's interesting. I think there's way too much content out there that was like, oh, that was nice. Like, I agree with you. But if we can't go do something with that information, you know, how does that help us move forward? We need to be able to change something about our approach or implement a strategy that's going to move the needle for us in some way. And so that's the other part is, if I put this out there, can someone do something with it? And that's really our measure of quality control, which, I mean, we've gotten that feedback before from people that when I read your content, I feel like I walk away knowing what I should do with this information, what to do next. And that was a really big part for us of creating quality, valuable content is, does the reader know what their next step is as a result of having consumed this content?
I love that. I love that. The call to action. What's the next value add? Where can they go? Holding their hand. You know, nobody wants to guess. They just want you to say, hey, go this way. Great. Yeah, I'm happy to do that. So one final question before we end. Everyone's thinking about this, AI. So AI can create really valueless content. In fact, we had one guest who said it was like 0-calorie content. And I love that term. How are you personally and your team using AI to enhance your ability to provide value instead of just like regurgitating, you know, garbage content that a lot of articles are, unfortunately?
I have said before, I think I'm a little too controlling with my content to fully give it over to AI. When I know what I want to say and how I want to say it, I just want to write the whole thing myself. And I can do that like pretty quickly, not as quickly as AI, but it's going to be probably 10 times better. I use AI from a content perspective, often for titles, because I'm terrible at titles. So I'll be like, here's the blog content, provide 5 title options, you know, and you could program it with your brand voice. So it can kind of offer things in that vein. Or you can use, there's like a CoSchedule has a headline analyzer that will analyze your title, make suggestions. That's AI powered. I also use it to help me figure out what I really don't want. Sometimes I'll plop things into ChatGPT-4 and say, hey, come up with this. And I'm like, that's terrible. But you know what? That actually gave me an idea for what I want to do instead. So I really think of it sometimes is what I really don't like or want. So I can find what it is that I do want. And something we're trying to use AI more for right now is capturing and synthesizing customer, like voice of the customer. So industry information, what are people saying on social? What are they saying in communities? What are they saying on our sales calls? What are they saying in account management? What are they saying on all of our webinars and roundtables? We're collecting all of this data. Every company we have all these insights, but they're unmined and untapped. And the reality is there is no human that has the bandwidth to read through all of that and synthesize it for people, but AI can do that really well. And so that's where we're looking at. That will help us keep a pulse on trends where it doesn't become recency bias. I just talked to this customer and they were talking about this. We can actually look at across the board, what are people most interested in? And so that's, I think, another way we're looking at the power of AI for content. But I think in terms of content generation, the quality is just not there yet.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's amazing. You use it to augment potential weaknesses. And I think that's super important, like the title generation, things like that, consume a lot of data. I also love your point. I've never heard this from anyone, but the idea of hey, write this article. Okay, cool. Now I know what not to do. This is the norm, right? Because it's obviously learning off of search results and all of that. This is what everyone else is doing. And this is how I can make my content different. And I think that's a really genius way of looking at it. So I love it. Shannon, I have learned so much and the time has come to an end. But Shannon, if anyone wants to continue the conversation, how can they reach out and connect with you online?
Best place is definitely LinkedIn. So Shannon Howard, you'll probably find me somewhere on LinkedIn.
Love it. Love it. And we'll link to you in the show notes and everything like that. Again, Shannon, thank you for your insights and expertise. Really appreciate your time today. Have a good one.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Content Amplified podcast. Please subscribe and leave us a review. And for additional ways to get more out of your content, visit our website at getmasset.com. That's getmasset.com. And tune in next time to the Content Amplified podcast.